Good. Okay, we're good. Starting semi on time. Thank you for showing up to the last session of the first day. I'm sure you're as spry as you were during the keynote. So this room holds about 700. We got about less than that, but we're good. It's it's for the video, so I'll do my best. So this is all about Windows Azure Pack Automated Essentials for Tenant Provisioning. My name is Charles Joy, Senior Program Manager on the Windows Server System Center CAT team. I call that whiskey quite a bit, so if you hear that come out of my mouth, that's what that stands for, not anything else. So this originally was going to be one of 3 sessions, and this was going to be the automation version. There was going to be an all-up and all that, but we got trimmed down to this, so I'm going to cover highlights of each of what was going to be in those, and we'll get started now. So, as I mentioned, whiskey stands for that stuff, and our charter is to accelerate adoption, provide customer insights to engineering, and deliver knowledge to the IT pro community. And again, the CAT part of this changes so much, I don't even know what it stands for right now, so for now, it's customers, which is most of you, and architectures, and we're talking about technology. But really, we're here for you and the community. And if you know anything about our blog, how many people are aware of the Building Clouds blog? Okay, before I showed you this up on there. Just kidding. All right, good, excellent. So everything I talk about and more is up at AKA MS Building Clouds. There's even shorter, AKA, it's BCB after that. One of the guys on our team wanted an even lazier way to get there, so it's http://aka.ms/bcb. And it's important because, like I said, everything I'm talking to you today and everything I will do in the future is up there. So all of it's free and available for you to use and read and whatnot. So the key learnings and takeaways for this session. I'm going to identify some automation options for tenant provisioning. We'll see SMA, or Service Management Automation, for tenant provisioning in action. And, of course, the ready-to-use downloadable example content you could download right now if you wanted to, and ignore me completely. There's also a video of the demo on YouTube. I'll give you the short URLs for that later in a blog post that talks about VM role lifecycle. We'll get to that. So first off, I'm going to level set on the technology here, since there weren't a lot of WAP-specific or SMA-specific sessions, especially as it's Monday, and those may come later or whatever. So we're going to do a little level set here. Windows Azure Pack, this is the standard Windows Azure Pack all-up sort of slide. It's really and most of you probably know what this is, hopefully. If not, what I like to refer to it as, it's a skin on top of, and it sits on top of Windows Server System Center. It allows for administrative access and tenant access. And really and when it boils down to it, it's to provision or automated provisioning or self-service provisioning of capacity, whether that's IaaS or PaaS for the private cloud. It looks a lot like Microsoft Azure, and there's a whole consistency thing, and people are tweeting. Oh, nice. All right. Probably should turn that off. There's a whole, Azure consistency thing from the public cloud to the private cloud. That's why it looks similar. And I'm not going to read through the rest of that. You kind of get the idea. And the portion I'm going to use in here for Azure Pack is really the SMA portion, which is one resource provider down at the very bottom currently, or not the very bottom, but near the bottom. And, of course, the VM role stuff, which I am automating. So SMA, or Service Management Automation, 3 key points to it are, it's web-based runbook authoring, which is nice. It does not require a FAT client to be installed anywhere. You don't have to, administer that one extra thing. It's IaaS for the website stuff, and then it has a database and a PowerShell provider, and of course a service that runs in the background. Highly available engine. Well, it's basically built on PowerShell workflow. So if you know PowerShell, you'll want to introduce yourself to PowerShell workflow, and if you want to be initially lazy about it, use inline script. That's a joke. But you should learn more about PowerShell workflow because it has a lot of great capabilities, even beyond that of Orchestrator, SMA's predecessor, like checkpointing. Well, that's the main one that I like about it. And of course, there's parallel execution and all that stuff too. But enough about that. But basically, the things that you'll be creating are PowerShell workflows inside of SMA. If you have existing PowerShell workflows, I'm not saying they'll work right out of the box, but they'll be darn close. And of course, there's the capability of integration to other systems. If you have existing PowerShell modules that you've built, that vendors have built, that we've built, as we as Microsoft, then you could import those right in and start working. The ones that I've leveraged in this example are for VMM and Windows Azure Pack, but you could leverage just about anything. Well, you can leverage anything probably that has a PowerShell module. And if it doesn't have a PowerShell module, you can go against web services. And that's the other portion that I did in my example, which is I'm going against the Windows Azure Pack web service using invoke web method, but you could use obviously invoke REST method. That was the first thing I tried and it worked. So now, as you can see on the left-hand side of this graphic, those are the resource providers that are available in Windows Azure Pack. As I said, automation's there near the bottom. And the scenario that I have in here is the scenario I'm going to be demonstrating is the tenant provisioning scenario. So we create a VM network for the tenant in VMM, and we're using VMM PowerShell there. We deploy VM roles for Microsoft workloads, and those are the ones available on building clouds. And we use the web service for that. We notify users upon completion, and then we potentially, eventually, will provide value-add services, depending on what we need to, or what is desired. We haven't gotten to that bit yet. I don't have that portion created, but we're still taking notes on what value-added services you might be looking for, so we can certainly blog about that in the future. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the UI so we can get a little more accustomed to it. So I'm going to switch over. All right, looks good. So as you know, there are two portals for Windows Azure Pack. This is what I'm going to call the service admin portal, and I'm going to call this the tenant admin portal. And for your convenience, we've skinned this one with the one that comes in the SDK. It looks a little different. So blue is the service admin. This color, blackish, gray, green, is the tenant portal. So I'm going to spend most of my time in this short demo over here, where, again, resource providers down the left, automation is the one we're looking at for this. And so really, it's about registering an existing install of SMA. Now, who knows where the SMA media is? How do you install it? So that's right. So some of you didn't know that or didn't want to raise your hand. It's on the orchestrator media. It's hidden lower left-hand corner, and there's three little things: the runbook service, the web service, and the PowerShell. And so you may have not known where that is, so you may have not started to use it. The other thing, once that's installed, this would look much like this, where it's not registered. Then once it's installed, you point it to the endpoint, and voila. So in order to access the UI, it's important to know that you you absolutely require Windows Azure Pack to be installed, which if you're just trying it out, you can use the Express install and install SMA, and then you're off to the races. Now, for SMA, once it's registered, installed and registered, you get a couple different views here. So dashboard, what's run recently. Runbooks, what you've created as PowerShell workflows that are installed and being leveraged or tested or just sitting dormant. But this is where it's a running list of stuff, and you can search by tags or anything that's in this list. So it'll filter, as you can see there. It does not do complex or advanced search there, but for now it's good enough to, if you're using tags, how I suggest you use tags. It'll work for some of your projects. And then there's assets. These are the things that you would think of in Orchestrator as variables, credentials, and things like that. So, also note, when you install for the first time, you will see a bunch of samples that I promptly got rid of because I don't like them to clutter up my workspace, but you can certainly look through them and use them as you see fit. You could also import the ones that we've made available via TechNet contributions, and it's up to you. Everything, but like I said, everything you see here is available from the blog. Now, the only other WAP portion that I'll show, because it relates to automation on this side of the house, is its connection to VMware. That's great. I failed at life. Okay. VMM via SPF. Now I can't even think. And this VM Clouds thing. There's too many VMs in here. And you can see the connection to the available clouds and VMM. And then there's this automation tab over here, which allows you to create triggers for your runbooks based on things that happen in WAP and SPF. So that's the service side. The other portion that I think I talk about in the slides, but I'll show you right now, is that whether you like it or not, I consider, well, that's not even a good way to say that, and I can't show it to you right now because I don't have a subscription yet, but the creation of VMs via VM roles by just entering little bits of data can be considered automation too, because you're filling out a form and that's doing a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes. So that's sort of the extent of automation from the tenant portal at this point, but it's pretty significant because you could spin up VMs pretty quickly by just typing in a couple fields. So unless I'm going to make more verbal screw-ups, I'll move on. So some background and terminology. What is a tenant? Well, this is just to set the context, but for purposes of the presentation, we're referring to someone who signs up for an account in the WAP portal and would like to subscribe to plans. It's on that gray-green side of the house when we're showing the demo. So you can provision new virtual machines, provision new services such as databases or websites, depending on if you have the PaaS stuff hooked up or if you have just the IaaS stuff hooked up. You could also obviously create new networks and whatnot, and we'll get to that later in the demonstration. In fact, I automate it all because I don't like clicking buttons. So what is tenant provisioning? Now I'll go into explaining the scenario a little bit. Excuse me. So what I want to do here is demystify the gray area between pure IaaS and pure PaaS, because you can deploy IaaS and then that turns into PaaS if you want to leverage it that way. But in our instance, I am literally just deploying IaaS machines when someone kicks off a subscription. So the tenant creates a new IaaS subscription. They've already signed up. They say, this is the plan I want. The automation builds out the set of VM roles or the infrastructure, and then the tenant admin takes over from there. They can log in. They could turn things on. They can go into the VMs or offer them up on the internet or on their intranet based on whatever they want to do there. So this may additionally include tenant network, which ours does, a domain, Active Directory in that tenant, and then multiple workload applications, even a jump box or something like that. And then to extend, as I said before, extending that concept to include both, you can have a VM that's SQL and IaaS, and then leverage those as needed. It's just networking at that point and configuration. So here's a screenshot that we took a while back when we were first starting this out. One of my teammates did actually, where we deployed the workload VMs via actually pointing and clicking. It was before we automated it. And then once they were provisioned in the order of AD and then, network, then AD, then link, exchange, SharePoint, then we logged in to prove that we just didn't demo that for fakesies, like I'm going to do for you later. So who provisions VM roles? And we're switching, not context necessarily, but we're going one click lower from WAP all up to a specific thing in WAP, and that's the concept of VM roles. So I probably should talk, what is a VM role? Is it the same thing as a VM template? No, it's not the same thing as a VM template. You can automate template provisioning as well, but VM roles offer a little bit more depth on what you do post-deployment. So instead of just spinning up a VM and here's the template and here's what the template said, this is where's the VHD, then what scripts are you going to run afterwards, and it'll provision the rest of it. It's very similar to service templates in VMM, except different and exposed via WAP. So who provisions these? Well, I think anybody can, depends on what you want to do and what your scope for your project is. But in our scenario that I'm going to talk about here, it's probably going to live either on the hoster side for spinning up a tenant with all the VMs that they might need, or enterprise maybe for dev test, like we're going to spin up 10 VMs and then that whole environment can be leveraged by the dev guys. I don't know how much a scenario provisioning an entire tenant for isolated network and isolated Active Directory. I don't know how feasible that is for an enterprise, but hosters probably, or maybe small and medium business would leverage those. But what we're getting across here is VM roles can be used universally across, and whatever they become in the future is the same concept. So the next slide I want to talk through is the VM role lifecycle, because there's a couple steps, or three major steps as I see, for VM roles, and it's the creation, their configuration, and then ultimately their automation, because no one wants to click and fill in buttons and fill in buttons and click fields. Yep, that's what I wanted to say. So there's currently, you may, if you've been to the blog, I posted this image and the concepts up, I don't know, a couple months ago, because I wanted to use it as the all-up page for VM roles and their life cycle. And all these live up on the blog. The short name for this, and I didn't update the slide because I just created this the other day, is AKA MS/VM role lifecycle, or WAP VM role lifecycle, as well as there's a video on there of the demo, which is WAP demo. So that's easy to remember. It's AKA MS WAP demo if you want to see the 8-minute demo of similar to what I'm going to show you here. Less explanation and probably less screwing up. So VM role gallery resources is the next section. We're going to briefly go through here because we want to get to the automation and any questions you guys have. So there are a number of different capabilities for VM role gallery items, and we have two different perspectives. So there's the admin perspective and then the tenant perspective, and then there's obviously differences between those two things. So from the admin perspective, they're functionally similar to service templates. You do have to learn a new authoring tool, which there are many videos that I did not create, though I host. So everyone says, hey, good videos. They weren't mine. They were Stephen Barron's, and I hosted them on my blog, my YouTube channel. But they're great to get you started. It is a new tool. It's up on Codeplex, and it essentially churns out JSON, which is what you need for the payload and the configuration of the VM roles. You can execute commands to install applications. And the OS and hardware choices are typically self-service. So you get drop-downs for which is the VHD that you want to use for the OS and whatnot. So that's the admin side. That's the I'm creating stuff and configuring it to a certain point. From the tenant side, you're using the other side, that WAP interface. You get greater insight and control over what you're self-service provisioning. And there's a couple new features such as resizing and clustered VMs and can resize online. So the key differences, VM roles are single VM entities. They're not multi-tier like service templates. And there is a bit of a regression as far as, from use like app controller or something like that, you can't service them. But you can grow their number of instances and change some of the CPU information once they're deployed. So there's a growing list or a library of VM role galleries, and it's all available via WebPI. Even this is not updated, but this slide is a little older. But the concept is, go check the WebPI feed, and you'll see more of those. There's SQL 2014 stuff out there now that came from our team, and you download them from there, and you can import and use them immediately, which is nice. Or you could tear them apart and do whatever you want with them. So I'm going to now, am I going to demo that? Workload gallery items. Yeah, why not? All right. So where do these live, these gallery items, where do they live on the admin side? Well, VM Clouds, Gallery, and we can see I have 5 of them available. And these are public. You can set their state, whether they're public or private. You associate them with plans, which I'll get to in a second. And once you associate them with plans and make them public, then once someone subscribes to that plan, they can go ahead and self-service by choosing them and going through that process. So let's see. The best place to go from here is to show you, there's the gallery of stuff, but how do they relate to the plan? So let's go down here to plans. You can see I have 3 plans, and this will be important for later on the demo. Basic plan is what it says. It's basic. It hooks and gives capacity to a specific cloud. So if we dive into that quickly, you can see Virtual Machine Clouds is the plan service here. You can see it's hooked to a VMM server. I got it right that time. And to a specific cloud. If we wanted to carve up that cloud's capacity for this particular plan, we could here. Obviously you see we have it unlimited on everything. If we wanted to give it specific networks that the tenant would have access to out of the box, we'd add it here. For the automation, I actually generate one on the fly and name it appropriately to that tenant so it's easier to see in VMM. You could assign specific hardware profiles, templates, VM templates, and then here are the gallery items. And you can add and remove right in this section for the specific plan. And then, of course, there's some additional settings. Some of these additional settings we get a lot of questions on. They're not accessible through the WAP portal, not all of them. The Connect to the console one is, but the other ones aren't. But they are available through the API, so you can store VMs if you really wanted to through the API. And then there's this custom settings name field down here. Initially, when we started out our project, our tenant provisioning project, I used this to key off of, but I no longer do that. But you could certainly leverage it however you want, since it gets passed in the event data when someone chooses a subscription. So let's take a look at one of the other subscriptions. For instance, the demo one here. Again, plan service is Virtual Machine Clouds. Still hooked to VMM. Still hooked to a cloud. Same old, same old. It's basically the same thing. So what's different? Well, that's where the automation comes in. And I'll briefly show that because I don't want to give too much away for the demo that's coming up. But down here, I have a runbook called Subscription Create Dispatcher because I have it hooked. So anytime a subscription gets created, kick off a runbook up in that automation section for VM Clouds. And if we look at this, just briefly, you can see I'm bringing in the object data that comes from SPF and WAP. This has a bunch of useful information. And then I'm parsing it. So I'm going to get the subscription name. And with that subscription name, I'm doing a if statement, and I'm going to kick off various runbooks based on that subscription name. So either I'm going to deploy the demo VM roles, which I'm going to do later, or the workload VM roles, which are the same thing as the demo VM roles, except it's a real runbook scenario, not a demo. So what I'm going to do is go over here to this portal because I want to show you the actual VM roles. So now that we know what plans are, and I'm a new user in here, I don't have anything. It's even telling me that I'm new and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm going to go new, my account, add subscription. You saw those 3 plans. Now they're exposed here. If they weren't public, they wouldn't show up here. Now, a key thing about that, if they aren't public, we could still automate them and push them to people. So it's one way of managing access to specific plans. So I'm going to just sign up for the basic one. And yes, you can have one subscription in multiple plans, or one user in multiple plans. They get separate subscription IDs. So what this is doing in the background, and this will actually kick off that runbook. So that's why you should be aware that once you have that event tied in, and while it's waiting, I'll show that again, up in VM Cloud's automation, if we look at this right here, well, that was interesting. Awesome. Well, I don't know why it's showing that one, but we'll have to squint here. So this says subscription. This says the actions create. This says kick off the dispatcher. So that's what it's doing right now. And it'll do that every time. That's why we have a dispatcher. It literally is going to dispatch that event. I interrogate the data, and then I do something specific based on it. Now, as you saw from the runbook, it doesn't do anything. It actually does one thing that's probably not useful. Oh, it's starting right now. So it will write to the output that it chose that plan. But on the portal side, the tenant portal side, nothing's going to happen. I can hit refresh here all day. I'm not kicking off any automation here. The other ones I will. But this is good for people. If you want to set up a simple plan like this with no automation, they could go new. They could create a virtual network. They could, well, once they do, then they could assign VM roles to it. So, and this is the whole point of the demo. This portion of the demo, took me that long to get here, is that I can go ahead and look at the available to me as a tenant VM roles that I've been allowed, I'm allowed to use. So I choose one, give it a name, and then I have a choice of computer sizes, I have a choice of operating system disks, and then I can fill out the rest. Now, again, I'm not going to click through that stuff, but this is, in a sense, automation, because you fill out the stuff, kick it off, and it's not like you're installing from scratch, And especially with the link, SharePoint, and Exchange, you're not going ahead and laying down the VM template, then going and get the media. That's a bit of automation there. So I'll hop into this since I had it open earlier. This is the job that executed just now. And you see all that data? That's what comes through the event as a JSON blob when that trigger happens. So you can parse the information that's in there as needed, and you can see basic plan chosen. That's the only thing the runbook does. It's real intense. All right, so I'm going to switch back over. Oh, this is riveting. I'm putting you guys to sleep. All right, authoring and configuration tools. I'm not going to dive into I'm not going to demo them, but I'm going to talk through them. So the VM role authoring tool, as I mentioned, is available up on Codeplex, and it has video tutorials available, including the most recent set that included the extension handler that allows you to deploy extensions to Azure IaaS. So I have links to all of this, including on that one blog post that I talked about earlier for more information about this. But this is the new tool. Yeah, point it at that screen. That's good. This is the new tool and sort of the UI of editing and creating VM roles. Now, you could use Notepad if you know your JSON real well. I recommend using the tool, though. I guess I am demoing something. So have any of you heard of Gallery Resource Import Tool, GRIT? Anybody? It's Bruno on our team created it, and it was very helpful because when you're configuring VM roles, you need to do stuff in VMM, you need to do stuff in WAP, and there are a couple different commands. Some of it's PowerShell, some of it's importing stuff, and it was just easier to have one tool, and happens to leverage PowerShell. Where did I put it? Let's see. I'll try that one and this one. Really? Yeah. I might actually just show you the blog post. Sigh. Yeah, that really just did happen. Okay. I use Contoso Labs so much I hardly ever come in here anymore. So, yeah, I feel extra great. You get a tour of building clouds now. How nice. All right. Building clouds automation would be the, the topic that you'd want. Well, not for this. Would it be? I can't even remember now. This is great. Yep, not there. I'm a genius. He even added a new one, a new version. But for more information on the gallery resource import tool, go ahead and check out this blog post. But essentially, it's PowerShell UI on a PowerShell script that allows you to download directly from WebPI. It downloads it locally, then you could import it right into your system. So it's pretty snazzy. And unfortunately, I wasn't prepared to demo this, unfortunately. But it's not my tool either. So, but the blog post runs you right through everything. So I know that's a cop-out, but definitely check Grit out if you're looking to import and configure VM roles into your WAP environment. I apologize about that. My demo will hopefully go a lot smoother than that. So here we are at the provisioning process options. And this is sort of where I live and spent most of my time. So as we see it, there are, let's say at least, so I don't want to be definitive, 4 methods of provisioning a tenant. There's the built-in self-service where you point and click and grab VM roles and all that. There's the tenant script and the admin script that I've built and put up on the blog. And those are available now, and I'll show you all about that in the next demo section. As it says there, it's available blog post, and this is the automation section. And then there's the API, and that's really, you could build your own resource provider, you could build your own portal, you could kick off via PowerShell, the SMA jobs or web service. And it really, what level of customization do you want? Do you want out of the box? Stick on self-service. If you want full control over everything, use the API and build your own portal or build your own resource provider. We do have examples on the blog about building a resource provider, and it's a Hello World example, and it initiates SMA runbooks with parameters, so it might be worth checking out if you want to go that route, because it exposes the automation to the tenant, which is not out of the box. Here we are with not that one. So this is where we'll spend the majority of the time, and then obviously any questions that you might have. So, as you saw, we had a plan that really did nothing but give me the ability to use capacity that's assigned to me. Well, I have other plans that do the automation behind it. So let's go ahead and choose one of those plans as a tenant. I'm going to choose the demo one. And as this explains, and you could put your own advertisement as it says, so your end users know, what they're going to get or what they're getting themselves into. You could lock it down with invitation codes, and you're going to see mine as clear as day here in a second. Basically, these are just different levels of access that you can provide. And you could obviously, like I said, make them all private, and then through automation, maybe front-ended from your portal or a SharePoint portal, kick off the plan subscription on the back end. So they don't even see any of this. They see some other portal, and then they get a bunch of VMs they have access to. You could do that too. But if you want to use the native portals and tools, you could certainly do it this way. So what this demo is going to do, and I'll show you the PowerShell behind it, is it's going to provision a set of VM roles: Active Directory, SQL, CRM Dynamics, Exchange, Link, and SharePoint, all at once with slight 30-second delays for demo purposes. And really, I usually get caught up in talking, and the 30-second delays don't even matter. But this is the demo portion of this. I have no dependencies built in. It's just going to spin up a bunch of VMs. And I'll show you the PowerShell behind it. I really want to show here that we have complete control over what we do through the automation. Like you can have it all go at once, which doesn't make sense because there's dependencies, or you can monitor and wait for something to finish and then continue, which I'll show you that script as well. And go. So this one's going to do a bit more than the other one because it's going to kick off, it's going to do the same thing, kick off that dispatcher, but then it's going to go down that if statement and actually create create all the VMs based on the various workflows or runbooks that are available to it. And it's not immediately apparent because we're sitting here and waiting to see what happens as a tenant. But on the administrator side, if we go over, you can see this is starting here. Now, the duration of time that this takes to start will vary based on the environment and what's going on, but this should start in the next 20 seconds. I don't want to be too generous with my estimations. And once it does, it's going to go and kick off all those nested runbooks. So you may look at this and go, well, you don't have much stuff running at any given time. That's a very good point. If you nest your runbooks, meaning if you call a runbook from within a runbook, unless you ask it to start a new job, it doesn't start a new job. So all the output, you have to be aware, is going to be in the job that executes. So you can see I've executed these multiple times, and while the other ones are being executed, they're being compiled into one giant script from the parent all the way down to the however many levels of nesting you have. So you can see it's running now. And it's not very exciting from this side because it just sits here and then it'll output data as it moves along. But the first thing it does is deploy. We could actually look at the VMM side. You can see the jobs it's spinning up. If we go over here, it may have already created the network. It may have not. It did. Cool. You can see I named it specifically with the user, and I'll show you how that's useful in VMM. And just to also show what I did automatically within the script, I gave it an address space, DNS server. I even enabled the gateway and NAT all within the script. That way, once these VMs are provisioned, I can actually go and log into them immediately. And the other thing I'm doing, this is going to be a mistake, I know, but I'm also sending email, and we'll see those pop in. So we have email and monitoring all worked into these runbooks. So I'll get an email saying, hey, you've chosen this plan, it's kicking off. Wait, and you'll get emails for Active Directory, link, and Exchange, and stuff like that. Let's see. This doesn't output anything until near the end, so I might take this opportunity. Oh, you can see my 30-second delays. I already forgot. So Active Directory and SQL, quote unquote, are being deployed, and then with another, half a minute, we're going to see Link, Exchange, SharePoint, Dynamics, and stuff being deployed. There we go. So they're all being deployed. In a real scenario, you would lay down AD and wait until it's done. Lay down SQL and wait till it's done. Then do the rest of them in any dependency order that you want. And I'll show you the automation behind it, and you'll see exactly why I'm getting away with what I'm getting away with. So these are going to take a little while. So, I was showing you VMM, wasn't I? Oh, look, see all creating, jobs. And the best part about it is the web service call that I make to do VM roles. It gives me back this VMM job ID. So I pass that to my VMM job ID monitor, and then I know exactly when the role completes, fails, or whatever, and I can send notifications based on that. So it's really nice. In the headers of the web request that I send, I get back the job ID GUID, which I couldn't have asked for anything more other than having to go and look for it, which would be terrible. So you can see it's actually happening. Now I'll go dive into the automation and you'll see, and I'll even open it up in ISE so you can see it a little clearer. I could zoom in and stuff. So here, author. Oh, that's not the one I want. Oh, well, I guess you remember that it kicked off either the demo one or the workload one. Obviously, we can go look at the demo one here, which is here. I'll just copy and paste it in. Yep, paste it right there. That's exactly what I wanted. And let's zoom in a little bit. So this is the one that gets initiated from the dispatcher. So this is the first level of nesting, and we'll see how many other levels of nesting that I've built in here. So it takes some parameters, some pretty self-explanatory. I get user role from the event data that comes back from the event. This is a variable that's set in the assets, another variable set in the assets. Token, I didn't really talk about this, but because all of Contoso Labs is ADFS, there's a different method to get the bearer token that's sent for the web service calls. Either way, it's the same token. Once you get it, it gets passed. And then email to and CC, obviously. Those are, let's see, did I get any emails? Oh, here we go. Here's some emails. Here, look. Tenant provisioning request successful. So the request was successful. And obviously I was just throwing this in for demo purposes, but you could do whatever you want. Once you have emails, you could do whatever you want. And you can see in progress, then if they fail, I'll get failures. If they're successful, I'll get successful, and all that. I'm going to close email to save myself any future problems. All right. So the next thing I do in the script is get an automation variable, which is one of the assets that I mentioned briefly earlier. And I could have hard-coded this, but why not use a variable when you can? I call a nested runbook called create tenant virtual network, which you saw was created. I then write some output. Then I deploy tenant VM role, which is another nested runbook that I could show you. You have two options when you deploy a VM role. You could either go directly against VMM using on behalf of commands, or you can go against the web service, which is automatically on behalf of. You just need to pass it a token. I chose to go that route because I like to use the web service as opposed to going directly against anything specific. Then I am, and you get some fame if you tweet, so go for it. Fame. So then I do a delay for demo purposes, and then I do another deployment of a tenant. So you see Active Directory, SQL, Dynamics, Exchange, Link, SharePoint. Do you want to see the secret behind my demo? Why it works all the time and it's really fast? Does anyone notice what I'm doing? I'm calling the domain controller over and over and over again because I know it's done in 10 minutes. But again, this is for demo purposes. I'll show you the real one and how I deal with that. But because I demo this a lot and I need it to be done in a like 10 minutes time frame, but this is the kind of control you have over it. You could do whatever you want. If you needed to do a quick demo or you needed to spin up 5 domain controllers with names that are wrong, you could do it, see? And then, of course, we send email and whatnot. So that's less interesting than the real one. So let me go to the real one. And again, these are process runbooks. In Orchestrator, they would be the runbooks that are calling the runbooks that call subroutines or something like that. So I will dive down, since we have plenty of time, into the other one, into the next level down too. But first I want to show you the real. This time I'm going to paste it correctly. So very similar. In fact, there was a copy and paste, and I changed some stuff. You can see over here, domain controller, Exchange, SharePoint. Those are actually calling with the correct versions and everything of the VM roles. So these are, this is as real as it gets. And over here, what's different is that when we deploy the tenant VM role, that same exact runbook, instead of just moving on to the next one, not caring, we're actually passing that SC job ID into our monitor runbook, which then goes and every 5 minutes goes and checks in VMM to say, hey, you done yet? Are you done yet? And of course, you could change the sleep duration if you want. And then once it's done, it's good to go. And if it fails, I didn't add failure because these haven't failed at all. But if it does fail, then, and if Active Directory fails, you're not going to probably go on, so you would just fail out. And a little tip that I learned when I was doing the Azure automation stuff if you want error stream stuff to be written to the stream data, you'll want to do a write output error, or write error with your message, and then do a throw, because if you just do write error and then stop, it will not write anything. But if you do a write error and then throw, it will write it and then throw and stop. So a little tip that I learned when I was using Azure Automation. I have not yet employed it here, but it's the same concept. So obviously the messaging is a little different because we're waiting and stuff like that, but it's the same exact command. I'm just calling the proper names. So you can see I didn't have to do much work to make a fake one. And then the real one is literally monitoring and waiting and moving on. So let's see where we are with this guy. I think it might be 10 minutes may have passed. Probably not. Still all provisioning, but I'll log into the Active Directory one once it starts up, and I'll show you. So let's take a deeper dive into the tenant. Oh, I guess I could show you the virtual network one. Let's see. So obviously, these tenants aren't anything if they don't have a network, and the VMs can't talk to each other. So this is what we've put in. And I hard-coded a lot of this stuff because I knew it was going to be the same. But you can use variables. You can pull it from input. You could create a hash table, pass it all in. But you see here, I'm going against VMM. Everything else you'll see is going against the WAP web service. So you see all these for on behalf of role. If you're going to use VMM, and you want to provision it so the tenant actually owns it, you'll need to leverage all that stuff. Now, you may ask, why didn't you use the WAP API for network? And I would tell you that I did not want to try to think of what the URLs for the web service are. The documentation wasn't complete when I did this. But it will be. I don't know if it is yet or not, but it's just then swapping these commands out for web service calls. And obviously you can do it via the portal. You can do it via the API. It just wasn't documented yet. And I wanted to leverage known good information that was out there. So that's the network one. I'm going to go to, here we go. All right, so this is my deploy VM role run book, and it'll be the first time I think you see my usage of inline script. That will be your biggest learning point when you're learning SMA or PowerShell workflow in general, is when you can use it, when it's appropriate to use inline script, when you have to use it, when you shouldn't use it and just use native commands. It's really, you're going to go along until you hit something that says you can't do this, try using inline script. I joke, but it's mostly what happens when you're going around or along learning this. So the important parts about deploying a VM role using the API, the WAP API, is the headers for the web service calls. So authorization requires a token, which you can get either using the WAP PowerShell commandlets, or you can do it via, there was a script posted on the blog for getting the token for ADFS. So obviously there are two different authentication methods, so there's two different ways to get it. In the example that's published, I use the easier one, which is not ADFS, but the ADFS information is published. There's a lot of other things you could minimize this script down from however many lines it is right now. That's not that many. But I'm going out and actively searching for the role as opposed to hard coding the URL. You could just hard code the URLs or store them as variables or whatever's easier. I just was trying to make something completely dynamic, leveraging VM role name, I think, or gallery item name. So I make a web request call, get the data back, make another call, get the data back, so on and so forth. The lessons learned here for me, though, were if you're going inside of inline script, outside of inline script, between runbooks or between workflows, hash tables don't like that. They don't survive that trip, and I learned the hard way. So what I'm doing is anytime I need to pass data back and forth, I'm leaving it in JSON until the last second when I convert it from or deserialize it and create it as its own hash table or something like that. You get weird results. It's not, I mean, it's probably consistent, but not enough for me to figure out what it was. But the best transport method for data between inline and outside of inline and between workflows for me was JSON. And the win there for me was it comes back from the web service in JSON, so it was easy enough just to keep it in that and then convert it later, as opposed to get it, convert it, then it gets destroyed somehow in translation, and then not very fun when you're trying to troubleshoot. Now, I will say the error messages are pretty decent, but you likely would have to check in VMM for any error messages you get. They'll be the best place to look, because remember, we're going against the web service, but that goes through WAP to SPF to VMM. So VMM is the final sort of resting place for the errors or the completions. I explain in detail the rest of this in the blog post, but in the end, and I think I call out to, yeah, I was trying to think. The JSON payload is something that you build because you need the resdef, which defines the VM role, and then you need its configuration. Then you need also its resource extensions and their configuration too. So this end payload is what you send on its last journey to the web service to actually post to create the VM role. Now, the thing you need before any VM role is created is a place to put it, a bucket of sorts. So this is the cloud service, and this section here defines, hey, does the cloud service exist? If it does, put it in there, sort of thing. And I did that for one main reason. I'm completely controlling what's happening in the automation, so it's okay that I'm doing that, but if you didn't want all the things to go in the same cloud service for whatever reason, you could do that. But I figured they're all related. All the VMs are related. Why not put them all in the cloud service? So I sort of put them in one bucket. That meaning you can go to that cloud service and see what it has via the OData and whatnot. So that's that level. There was one other level I wanted to show. Here it is. So that was actually the lowest level. I missed a step, which I'll show you right now, and then we'll go back and see the status. So, and I guess it was good to show you that, because that bit of script that you saw right there was as generic as I can get it. It doesn't have to do with any particular VM role or anything. And I wanted to do that because I hate having 5 different scripts for 5 different VM roles. I wanted one main script that did the deploying, and anything that needed customization, I'll layer on top of it and pass it in. And that's what this role, or this workflow does. So same kind of thing. And you can see we passed the token from high up down to the lowest levels. We're gathering information or generating stuff. We're, our first time, we're gathering, because we know that this VM role requires standard things. What's the size? What's the OS disk? Password, time zone. I'm gathering that in a hash table here. But we don't know, well, if it's the domain controller, it has some other extension stuff that we need to know about, like domain, NetBIOS name, password on the domain. Link has a different set. SharePoint has a different set. So as opposed to creating 4 different scripts, I created, here's the generic stuff that applies to all of it. And then if the gallery item name is domain controller, well, add this stuff to the hash table. If it's link, add this stuff. You don't have to do it this way. If you only have one thing that you're deploying, you could just bunch it all together. I just wanted to show you that there's options to get things running in a more maybe efficient, and it saves you some lines of script. Then, once it's gone through all the if statements on which it needs, and really, if you think about it, if I add CRM for real or I add another one, I would just need to know what's different and add another if statement. Now, I put a challenge out on my blog that no one took, that you can probably get this more refined and dynamically know what each of them needs and populate it on the fly and stuff like that. I tried to do some compare array stuff, and I just didn't want to waste any more time on it. But it's probably, you could probably make this more dynamic if you really wanted to. Anyway, we convert it to JSON, and this is where I was talking about earlier. Originally, I wasn't. I was keeping this as a hash table and trying to pass it into the next workflow, and then it went into the inline script, and it went. So keeping it as JSON, it's a string of really ugly string. So that's where I pass the JSON to this sub runbook. So I haven't been keeping track, but there's at least 4 layers or 4 nested levels in this. And and see this? This is the magic to getting the VMM ID from the run. VM role, like, because in this one, we send the invoke web request, then I get the data, I write the data out, then it comes up here, comes out of the inline script as VM role, sorry, and then I'm going back down here and I'm writing that out, because remember, this is nested, so this gets presented up to this one, here. Remember, that's output from a web request. So it's going to look like, 201 created and a whole bunch of headers and whatnot. If you do this exact same thing, vmrole.headers, or whatever your object name is that you got the return value from the web request, .headers, this is the field you want. I would have never guessed that as the VMM job ID, as it's not named a VMM job ID, but in an interrogation of the GUIDs, I did find out that they're the same. So that's actually all the runbooks that are involved in doing this. So let's take a look at the results. Oh, how convenient. All right. So they're all magically provisioned. And if we dive into one of them, and I remember the password, and it works, a lot of ifs there. Who knows if it's going to work? Maybe not. Oh, there we go. And that's the cool part about if you use console, is that you could reboot it right now and it would work. Oh, goody, I don't know what I did for the username. I think it was maybe, I could use administrator. I guessed right. Hey, that's the problem with the automation. I put the password in a variable a long time ago, and then I demo this and never actually log in. And if I'd logged into any of them, they would be Active Directory machines. But they would have different labels with specific names and whatnot. So the one thing that the VM role out of the box for Active Directory does not include is it doesn't update itself as a certificate authority, and that's a requirement for the link integration, or the link VM role. So you need to either update the VM role to do that, or pause and then do it first, then update it. Now, an interesting thing, especially with PowerShell workflow, you can suspend a workflow on purpose. And then in SMA, it will wait, you could resume it. So if you wanted to inject user interaction, you put a suspend in there, and then send an email, then suspend it, and then say, go do this, and email back or whatever, and then you could hit go, and so you could inject that sort of manual process in there. I actually have an example of that in my Azure automation runbook that I published a couple weeks ago, because it creates a bunch of stuff in Azure, then it suspends on purpose and says, hey, go upload your VHD. That was my sort of move VHD thing. Once you upload the VHD, it goes ahead and finishes off and creates a VM image and all that. So it's pretty useful. I don't know if it's a best practice yet, but SMA really does take takes nice advantage of suspend and checkpoint and all that stuff. So anyway, that's probably enough of that VM. All right, let's see what else the PowerPoint has to offer. I'd rather stay in demo mode, believe me. All right, what's next? What's next? So looking to the future, the time is now. It's a Highlander 2 reference, I don't know. Microsoft Azure Automation, it's automation in the public cloud. If you haven't and you're interested and you've already done some SMA work, you know PowerShell workflow, it's kind of fun just to do automation in the portal from Azure. If you're hitting internet endpoints and web services, it works like a charm. And if you're hitting Azure, there's a Connect Azure runbook that the team has built. And it gets you rolling right away. So DSC plus VM role, we're investigating how they would work best because they do similar things, but VM role can just basically stand up the machine and then throw down a DSC script, and it could do the rest. I mean, you could do that. Or if everything's connected, you just use some automation, put a configuration script in SMA, and just say go apply this to 10, like a push server for DSC. The JIT-GIA or GIA, I don't know what actual official name is, but it's just in time, just enough admin. You layer that on top of SMA, then you can restrict access to which admins have permissions to execute which SMA runbooks. Jeffrey Snover is going to talk about that Wednesday. And then Windows-based VM role extensions to Microsoft Azure IaaS virtual machines. That long-winded statement is the blog post and videos and all that just came out a month ago. But it's basically the newest version of the VM role authoring tool, plus the Microsoft Enterprise Application Extension Handler. It's that VM agent that's in Azure IaaS VMs that allows you to do stuff, but like push resx extensions. Yes, extensions. That's what I wanted to say. They asked for us to put quotes in, so that's my favorite one. And that, again, the VM role lifecycle. And the AKA website for this is aka/ms/WAP VM role lifecycle, and the other one is WAP demo. Really easy. And everything's available via building clouds, Technet Gallery, or WebPI for the VM roles. And there's some sessions that I recommend. The GIA one, there's an intro to Microsoft Azure Automation that Eamon is going to do. It's later in the week. There is yours is not up there, is it? What's it? Self-service automation. Ryan and what's your name? I'm sorry, Mike. I'm terrible. Are going to do a session on Thursday on leveraging SharePoint, right, to initiate SMA runbooks. So that's a nice thing. And so if you search for Ryan Andorfer as the speaker, I recommend that one as well. And then I'm obviously on the blog. I'm going directly after this to the expo. So if you have questions or want to punch me in the face for being dumb, you can certainly do that. Please don't punch me in the face. Ask me questions. It's more fun for me. And then all this stuff. You can ask me questions right now. I could demo more stuff or whatever. We have 11 minutes and 45 seconds for questions and whatnot, or me to ramble. And evaluate this session, I guess. Appreciate your time. And if you had those forms, I'm sorry I didn't talk about it in the beginning. I failed again. Please fill them out and hand them back. They're looking for feedback on the UI. You can affect change in the product, so why not, right? And if you didn't get a chance, or because I forgot and all that stuff, we'll have them at the booth probably, or we can, and tell your friends, because if they want to, and it has two sides, so please fill it out if you get a chance. I realize it's on a piece of paper, but what else would you use those pens for, right, that you got? So, and come see me at the booth and go to see those sessions and all that. Thank you very much, and sorry for saying VMware. We're using VMM PowerShell there. We deploy VM roles for Microsoft workloads, and those are the ones available on building clouds. And we use the web service for that. We notify users upon completion, and then we potentially, eventually, will provide value-add services, depending on what we need to. or what is desired. We haven't gotten to that bit yet. I don't have that portion created, but we're still taking notes on what value-added services you might be looking for, so we can certainly blog about that in the future. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the UI so we can get a little more accustomed to it. So I'm going to switch over. All right, looks good. So as you know, there are two portals for Windows Azure Pack. This is what I'm going to call the Service Admin Portal, and I'm going to call this the Tenant Admin Portal. And for your convenience, we've skinned this one with the one that comes in the SDK. It looks a little different. So blue is the Service Admin. This color, blackish, gray, green, is the Tenant Portal. So I'm going to spend most of my time in this short demo over here, where, again, resource providers down the left, automation is the one we're looking at for this. And so really it's about registering an existing install of SMA. Now, who knows where the SMA media is? How do you install it? So that's right. So some of you didn't know that or didn't want to raise your hand. It's on the orchestrator media. It's hidden lower left-hand corner, and there's three little things: the runbook service, the web service, and the PowerShell. And so you may have not known where that is, so you may have not started to use it. The other thing, once that's installed, this would look much like this, where it's not registered. Then once it's installed, you point it to the endpoint, and voila. So in order to access the UI, it's important to know that you you absolutely require Windows. Good, okay, we're good. Starting semi on time, thank you for showing up to the last session of the first day. I'm sure you're as spry as you were during the keynote. So this room holds about 700. We got about less than that, but we're good. It's, it's for the video, so I'll do my best. So this is all about Windows Azure Pack Automated Essentials for Tenant Provisioning. My name is Charles Joy, Senior Program Manager on the Windows Server System Center CAT team. I call that whiskey quite a bit, so if you hear that come out of my mouth, that's what that stands for, not anything else. So this originally was going to be one of 3 sessions, and this was going to be the automation version. There was going to be an all-up and all that, but we got trimmed down to this. So I'm going to cover highlights of each of what was going to be in those, and we'll get started now. So as I mentioned, whiskey stands for that stuff, and our charter is to accelerate adoption, provide customer insights to engineering, and deliver knowledge to the IT pro community. And again, the CAT part of this changes so much, I don't even know what it stands for right now. So for now, it's customers, which is most of you, and architectures, and we're talking about technology. But really, we're here for you and the community. And if you know anything about our blog, how many people are aware of the Building Clouds blog? Okay, before I showed you this up on there. Just kidding. All right, good. Excellent. So everything I talk about and more is up at AKA MS Building Clouds. There's even shorter, AKA, it's BCB after that. One of the guys on our team wanted an even lazier way to get there, so it's http://aka.ms/BCB. And it's important because, like I said, everything I'm talking to you today and everything I will do in the future is up there. So all of it's free and available for you to use and read and whatnot. Runbook authoring, which is nice. It does not require a FAT client to be installed anywhere. You don't have to, administer that one extra thing. It's IIS for the website stuff, and then it has a database and a PowerShell provider, and of course a service that runs in the background. Highly available engine. Well, it's basically built on PowerShell workflow. So if you know PowerShell, you'll want to introduce yourself to PowerShell workflow. And if you want to be initially lazy about it, use inline script. That's a joke. But you should learn more about PowerShell workflow because it has a lot of great capabilities, even beyond that of Orchestrator, SMA's predecessor, like checkpointing. Well, that's the main one that I like about it. And of course, there's parallel execution and all that stuff too. But enough about that. But basically, the things that you'll be creating are PowerShell workflows inside of SMA. If you have existing PowerShell workflows, I'm not saying they'll work right out of the box, but they'll be darn close. And of course, there's the capability of integration to other systems. If you have existing PowerShell modules that you've built, that vendors have built, that we've built, as we as Microsoft, then you could import those right in and start working. The ones that I've leveraged in this example are for VMM and Windows Azure Pack, but you could leverage just about anything. Well, you can leverage anything probably that has a PowerShell module. And if it doesn't have a PowerShell module, you can go against web services. And that's the other portion that I did in my example, which is I'm going against the Windows Azure Pack web service using invoke web method, but you could use obviously invoke REST method. That was the first thing I tried and it worked. So now, as you can see on the left-hand side of this graphic, those are the resource providers that are available in Windows Azure Pack. As I said, automation's there near the bottom. And the scenario that I have in here is the scenario I'm going to be demonstrating is the tenant provisioning scenario. So we create a VM network for the tenant in VMM. And so the key learnings and takeaways for this session. I'm going to identify some automation options for tenant provisioning. We'll see SMA, or Service Management Automation, for tenant provisioning in action. And of course, the ready-to-use downloadable example content you could download right now if you wanted to, and ignore me completely. There's also a video of the demo on YouTube. I'll give you the short URLs for that later in a blog post that talks about VM role lifecycle. We'll get to that. So first off, I want to level set on the technology here, since there weren't a lot of WAP-specific or SMA-specific sessions, especially as it's Monday, and those may come later or whatever. So we're going to do a little level set here. Windows Azure Pack, this is the standard Windows Azure Pack all-up sort of slide. It's really and most of you probably know what this is, hopefully. If not, what I like to refer to it as it's a skin on top of, and it sits on top of Windows Server System Center. It allows for administrative access and tenant access. And really and when it boils down to it, it's to provision or automated provisioning or self-service provisioning of capacity, whether that's IaaS or PaaS for the private cloud. It looks a lot like Microsoft Azure, and there's a whole consistency thing, and people are tweeting. Oh, nice. All right. Probably should turn that off. There's a whole, Azure consistency thing from the public cloud to the private cloud. That's why it looks similar. And I'm not going to read through the rest of that. You kind of get the idea. And the portion I'm going to use in here for Azure Pack is really the SMA portion, which is one resource provider down at the very bottom currently, or not the very bottom, but near the bottom. And of course, the VM role stuff, which I am automating. So SMA, or Service Management Automation, 3 key points to it are, it's web-based Azure Pack to be installed, which if you're just trying it out, you can use the Express install and install SMA, and then you're off to the races. Now, for SMA, once it's registered, installed and registered, you get a couple different views here. So dashboard, what's run recently. Runbooks, what you've created as PowerShell workflows that are installed and being leveraged or tested or just sitting dormant. But this is where it's a running list of stuff, and you can search by tags or anything that's in this list. So it'll filter, as you can see there. It does not do complex or advanced search there, but for now it's good enough to, if you're using tags, how I suggest you use tags, it'll work for some of your projects. And then there's assets. These are the things that you would think of in Orchestrator as variables, credentials, and things like that. So Oh, also note, when you install for the first time, you will see a bunch of samples that I promptly got rid of because I don't like them to clutter up my workspace, but you can certainly look through them and use them as you see fit. You could also import the ones that we've made available via TechNet contributions, and it's up to you. Everything, but like I said, everything you see here is available from the blog. Now, the only other WAP portion that I'll show, because it relates to automation on this side of the house, is its connection to VMware. That's great. I failed at life. Okay. VMM via SPF. Now I can't even think. And this VM Clouds thing. There's too many VMs in here. And you can see the connection to the available clouds and VMM. And then there's this automation tab over here, which allows you to create triggers for your runbooks based on things that happen in WAP and SPF. So that's the service side. The other portion that I think I talk about in the slides, but I'll show you right now,